Kevin Whalen, partner at the Geyer Group, talks to host Doug Simon on PR's Top Pros Talk.
Kevin, for context, can we start by having you talk a little bit about the Geyer Group and what your focus is?
Sure. We're a B2B communications firm working with technology companies. I'm a partner now at the Geyer Group, but I was a client uh, when I was inside companies running corporate communications. I'm not an agency lifer. I've spent 90% of my career inside companies. And I brought the Geyer Group in to replace an agency. And the first thing I noticed was the experience of the team. So I had a day-to-day account manager who had 20 years experience like I did at the time. And it was just a different level of service, of strategic insights, of bouncing ideas. And I was getting from a team with, a very talented team, but someone leading it, with 6, 8 years experience. It's just a different experience with the depth of experience that the Geyer team brought to the table. So I was super impressed by that. And when I had a chance to join up with Charlie, I took it. And today we offer all kinds of stuff beyond PR. We're not just a PR agency. We do everything from full branding and design to content strategy and development, social media, marketing tech stack, whether it's Marketo or Pardo or HubSpot. We do events, and then of course, media and analyst relations. So we have a very broad portfolio staffed by very senior people that were, VPs at great PR agencies like Weber and Fama, and creative directors and content strategists at places like Sapient and Digitas. So great team, great experience, and a broad portfolio of services today, well beyond just PR.
We haven't talked much on the show about analyst relations. Is there a specific piece of advice as an approach to analyst relations that might be different that startups need to be knowing about?
We love analyst relations at Gaia Group. We have people on staff who only have done analyst relations for their whole career. And there's a lot of misperceptions about what is analyst relations. A lot of companies think that it's just about getting in a magic quadrant, or they think that analyst relations is just about having a one-way conversation, telling the analyst how great your company is. They hear that from everybody. That's not really what it's about. That's not how you become a leader in a major report like a Magic Quadrant. When analyst relations is done right, it should improve and impact all aspects of your business. You should be telling analysts about your business challenges and asking for advice and guidance so they can help you solve those challenges. If you're just screaming sunshine at them every day about how great everything is, you're going to go down a couple notches rather than up, because that's not how reality is. So AR is really about consistency of engagement and having a two-way dialogue. Because at the end of the day, you got to recognize what their business model is. Large firms are set up as consultancies to provide guidance and advice to clients. So whether you're you're a CIO and you have to make technology buying decisions, or you're a vendor trying to convince that CIO that you have the best solution, analysts sit in the middle of those conversations. And the way to educate them and engage with them is through that two-way dialogue. So just talking at analysts is not going to get the job done. And that's probably the number one misperception that I see.
That's a great insight. One of the things, though, it takes a bit of trust for people because no one else generally wants to be airing dirty laundry or even not perfectly clean laundry, if you will. So, how do you develop that level of trust or even convince a company to be open to sharing their challenges?
It does take some guidance with CEOs. They don't want, CEOs and founders are very proud of what they've created and what they're doing. So they don't want to show the warts and talk about the things that aren't exactly going great. But there's a lot of research that the analysts themselves put out about best practices of engaging with us. Gartner especially has all kinds of best practices research for comms people to work with Gartner. They're very explicit about telling you how they want to work together. And what they expect and want, and the way their whole business is set up, is consultative. They want to hear your challenges. They want to feel like they're guiding your strategy and see that you're following their advice and you're making these advancements. And that's how you really engage with analysts. It's not just by telling them how great the company is.
That's really interesting because obviously people with egos, and many people do have that, especially in that type of field, want to feel that you're heeding their advice and might have a negative response if they don't feel that you're
Exactly.
listening or even interested in
It's
them.
similar in like a media relations standpoint when you put a founder on the phone and let's say it's an article or a story about a big industry trend, and the founder keeps pulling themselves back to make every answer about how their company solves that problem rather than speak to the big industry trend, that makes you not that great of a resource for the journalist. The same thing is true in the analyst world. If you only come on and tell the analyst how great everything is, you don't really have anything to work out with them, you're less valuable as a source of information for the analyst, because the analyst benefits from a 360 perspective about everything that's happening in the industry, from the vendor side, from the buyer side, where are those pressures and challenges and the different approaches. And the more you are honestly engaging with them about your business challenges, you go up in credibility in their eyes versus the next guy who's just blowing smoke all day about how wonderful everything is.
So obviously you work in the tech space, and that can have, industry as a whole can be somewhat of a roller coaster ride. What's hot, what's not hot, growing trends. So how do you navigate through those trends when communicating with analysts? And hopefully you're coming at it from a spot that your company might be outperforming what's happening in the industry. But how do you share that kind of industry of information when the trends might be working against you?
When you become a client of one of these bigger firms like a Gartner or Forrester, that's where you get your access to the analysts. And the way they're set up is they have inquiries and briefings. Inquiries are where you ask questions of the analyst and you have a back and forth dialogue to engage on these issues. Like, we see this trend coming. What's the best way for our company to approach this trend? Who should we partner with that will help us deliver on this trend? Versus a briefing where it's a one-way discussion where you talk to the analyst and basically tell them, oh, here's our approach to the trend. But in a briefing, they don't give you any feedback. So if you're a client of a Gartner or Forrester, the recommendation would be to have consistent engagement with the analyst and work through all the issues around that trend and what you're trying to solve, and work with them in a disciplined, consistent, engaged format of a series of inquiries on various aspects of the trend and the topic, so that you're building up over time and really educating each other about what your approach is, how you're going to solve this problem for customers. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah. What if you don't have the budget to, say, be hiring one of these major companies to work with? Is there still any value in analyst relations, and how do you approach that? Because I would think a lot of startups just don't have.
The seat at the table at Gartner is these days upwards of $70,000 for one seat. And that's a huge ticket. That's bigger than some marketing departments at startups. So in that case, if you're not a client, Gartner, a vendor briefing is open to anybody. So any company, you don't have to be a client. Only Gartner clients get inquiry time. So you can do a briefing with a Gartner, but you're only going to get one briefing and be able to tell them your story once. It's not going to do a lot for you, but there's a whole world of other analysts besides the big three, Gartner, Forrester, IDC. And so we advise a lot of the smaller clients, start with some of these more niche shops, the smaller firms that are less restrictive in how they interact with clients or non-clients. So you may be able to do a briefing with a smaller niche firm that's going to have a very vigorous conversation with you for 45 minutes about your products, whereas a Gartner briefing is just one way. They don't give any feedback. So there's a whole layer of smaller niche analyst firms, and even what we call like single shingle, people who used to be analysts, now they have their own firm and they're out on their own. And there's even now like a new category of analysts where they're part analyst, part media commentator. They have a column, in certain media outlets, but they also do analyst advisory work. And so there's like a blurring of the lines between the media and the analysts. So for companies without a ton of budget, there are things that you can do out there to have analysts help improve your strategies, and maybe even write a quick snap report on your company. Like, for instance, Omdia has something called the On the Radar report. So if you do a briefing with Omdia, you don't have to be a client. You could be a startup. You impress the analysts. They think you're doing something interesting in the market, and they write what they call an On the Radar. It's like a 4 or 5 page SWOT analysis of your company, and it gets posted on Omdia to all of their subscribers. And then if you're happy with the outcome, and they're usually generally positive, you can license it for $6,000 or $7,000, put it on your website as a marketing asset, top of funnel asset, and you have a nice piece there, differentiated third-party support of your approach and strategy, and it costs you $7,000, $8,000 rather than $70,000 for a seat with Gartner. So there's a lot of things that can be done outside of the big three.
I'm a small business owner myself. If I was going to approach Omdia, Is that a good thing to do? Should you look to work with different small single shingle lists, if you will, or is it really you've got to just sort of pick one, roll the dice, and see what they say about you?
Yeah, I mean, we're a believer in crawl, walk, run. So, we would start with some small firms, maybe some independent analysts, work on your story, on your messaging, and you want to put your best foot forward when you're dealing with the bigger, more prominent firms. So, having a couple at bats, so to speak, to use a baseball analogy, to have a couple at bats before you get to the tier ones is typically a good practice for clients. So we would start small, work on your messaging, make some adjustments, and kind of work your way up the value chain.
Interesting. So let's say I'm a small business. Should I just contact an Ombia directly, or do I need some counsel on how to prepare for that initial briefing?
Yeah, I think in the initial briefing, you need to really have a tight deck and story and narrative about what you're telling them. I think you need to bring a degree of realism about where you're at and what your challenges are. Again, they don't want just the sunshine. Um, and then in terms of the messaging, there are certain things that analysts want to see. The number one thing that we would recommend you have in any deck right away in the first couple of slides is how are you different? Just take cybersecurity, for example. We work with a lot of cybersecurity clients. We've been very fortunate in that area. There's 3,600 vendors in cybersecurity.
Right.
Analyst Richard Stein does a great job of tracking the industry. And 3,600 vendors, that's a lot of noise. So that's one of the first things that needs to be in that deck is your differentiation. And then, we would do a whole analyst training before putting anyone in front of Omdia or anybody else around, what to have in your deck, what kind of questions to be prepared for. So I wouldn't recommend just running directly into a analyst engagement. There is some upfront work. You want to make sure that, you only get one chance to make a first impression, so you want to do it right.
And I would think you'd need up-to-date financials and that type of information as well. I'm sure they'd want to know about that.
Yeah, somewhat in the financials. You don't have to open the books, but you need to provide some directionally accurate information so they know where you're at in your life cycle.
This has been really informative. Definitely glad it's a video podcast so people didn't get our voices confused with each other. Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I think about analyst relations is how much it should impact the whole organization. It's not just about appearing in a magic quadrant. If you have a good best practice analyst relation program, you should be getting insights that improve your product strategy, your go-to-market strategy, your partner strategy, your messaging and your positioning, your differentiation. Every aspect of your business can be improved through effective best practice analyst relations. It's about much more than just appearing in magic quadrants.
This has been a magic conversation. Appreciate your thoughtful advice.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. Appreciate it.